I am Van. My name is Van Jones. I think a lot of people know me from being on TV or for being an activist, but really my most important job is dad. I've got two young men, both in double digits now, still in grade school. This has been a crazy experience for them. And, we've got parents all across the country having a similar experience, Nisha.
Yeah, and I'm the CEO at DreamCorps, but I'm also a working mother of two. My kids are in high school and middle school. And in the spring, when it shut down, it was hard. And throughout the summer, it was hard. And I've been lucky to work with Van for the last 7 years. So one of the things I did was call him up and think through what in the world could we possibly do to make it less hard. The people who are getting hit the worst by the pandemic, the economic downturn, the inequality and inequities that are in distance learning and education in general, Van wanted to do something. So Van, I'll let you.
Yeah, good tell. Luckily, the Dream Corps is a good, strong organization located in Oakland, California, but it's a national group. Nish has been leading that quite well, but we got other folks involved as well. Reached out to Ariana Huffington at Thrive, and her team's amazing. They said, yeah, listen, we got kids who are having a hard time, parents are having a hard time, teachers having a hard time, but there's got to be some solutions out there that we can start sharing with each other. So we got NextDoor involved, the Dream Corps, of course, DonorsChoose. We already mentioned DonorsChoose. They got involved, the CAA Foundation, and they've been meeting, pretty much every day for several weeks, trying to figure out, is there some way that we can put our heads together nationally? We could wait. Help could be on the way. The government might solve this tomorrow, but I don't think so. And so we're gonna have to solve it ourselves. And we've already, as you're getting here, we've got a lot of people participating in the millions already. But if you want to add your solutions, you've got some smart stuff you've been doing, some apps that you found, some tricks that you found, some neighbors you've been working with, other teachers you've been sharing ideas with. Now's the time to share that with everybody. And you can do so by sharing your ideas and solutions on social media today, using hashtag back to school solutions. That's how we're going to be spreading the word. Hashtag back to school solutions to start crowdsourcing some of our best ideas across the country. And Nisha, why don't you tell them who we're going to be hearing from besides us?
Yeah, and we already have great ideas. If you put it with the hashtag, we've been publishing it on the website, backtoschoolsolutions.us, which is a clearinghouse for all of these great crowdsourced ideas. So there's a lot already out there and a lot of great conversations already happening. As Van said, we had 2 million people join the topic page, Parenting School-Age Kids, on NextDoor. Over 6,000 posts with solutions and 30,000 replies. We're hearing from parents, retired teachers, students, and there is a lot happening, and you're going to hear about it today. So today we're going to have students speak from around the country. Teachers and parents join us, and we'll introduce them all as we talk about it. Arne Duncan is here, former U.S. Secretary of Education, who's now with the Emerson Collective. And like Van said, we need everybody to join us. So I hope we'll be able to hear from you through Back to School Solutions. We have a lot of prizes to give away, so I want to shout out some partners. The NFL has donated quite a bit of video games, and I know Christmas is around the corner, so we'll be sending a lot of those out. DonorsChoose also has a way for you to give back to your local teachers. So when you enter your solution, you're eligible for the prizes. So that's just a shout out to get you all involved. So Van, why don't you kick us off? Tell us about the first panel.
Yeah, I'm excited about what we're doing because one of the things is that the young people themselves are just so smart. They're directly impacted, as a lot of times we've been saying. People who are closest to the problem are often closest to the solutions, but they often don't have the megaphone, they don't have the platform, they can't get heard. And so we're going to hear from some of the young people themselves, especially we're delighted to have Merrit Jones. She's joining us from Columbia, South Carolina. She's a student advisor of something called Student Voice, and it's a not-for-profit organization, and it's dedicated to strengthening the student movement. They're empowering high school students to take up action on the issues that impact them. I want to welcome to this conversation, Merrit Jones. Love your last name, by the way, Merrit.
Thank you, Van. I really have the great honor of introducing 2 other students today that we're going to spend a lot of time diving into just some of the things they're going through right now. But since the beginning of COVID, we as students have really been thinking about the systemic issues that have unearthed themselves in new ways to all of us. I think most of us here know that they've existed and only been exacerbated by this pandemic. But from the beginning, students have been getting to work. They've been talking about solutions. They've been thinking about ideas, expressing their frustrations, advocating at their school boards, at their state levels, and even federally for increased funding and resources. At the beginning of the pandemic, I started talking to students all over the country, and that's how I met folks like Opal and Francis, who I'm getting ready to introduce. And through those conversations, me and my peers worked to just create a set of guiding principles for what we really believed were absolutely necessary for equitable reopening. And that became a nationwide campaign we're calling Move School Forward. Because I think bottom line is we don't want to return to the same system we left back in the spring. And as we are all heading back to school this week next and in a couple weeks in New York, I think now more than ever, it's important to be talking to students and be in conversation with students if we really want to find solutions. And that is why I am thrilled to introduce our first panelist here, Opal Baysaw, who is a high school junior in Kalispell, Montana. She is a journalism fellow at Student Voice, and she is a passionate and fierce disability advocate. So I'm going to just open up the floor to you, Opal, to just share, what happened this spring and what's been going on in Montana with your personal learning situation, knowing that you're a student who has an IEP and has been thinking about things like that, and IEPs, 501s, and how your peers are dealing with that.
There has actually been a lot going on with that. Like, as far as last spring went, online school was obviously new for everyone in the state because schools closed down in March. And so there were a lot of kinks to be worked out as far as the amount of work that was given, because one of my accommodations is reduced and alternate assignments. And so sometimes the ways that I did my assignments and how much work I did in the day needed to be adjusted quite a lot, because I had friends that would end up with 3 hours of work a day, but since everything tends to take me a little longer, I would end up with the same amount of work, if not more work, than I had in a typical in-person school day.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to that, but I want to introduce our second panelist, Francis Suavillo, who this spring was in LAUSD, and she was serving the school district as a student board member. So as we introduce you, Francis, I would love to hear what it was like this spring as we started going online, and just sharing a little bit about your experience in being an advocate in that position and having to be a voice for young people in one of the largest school systems in our country.
Hi, so like Merrit mentioned, I served as the sole student board member for the Los Angeles Unified School District in my senior year. And the transition to online learning was difficult for a lot of us. We serve over 600,000 students, and a lot of our students don't have the resources to have stable internet connection or have electronics that can help aid them with the transition to online learning. So it was definitely a lot of trying to be patient and trying to make sure that we're there for students who need the help. And a lot of our students, go to school and get their meals from schools as well. So we made sure that those resources are still available for students and families who do depend on getting their nutrition from school grounds. It was a tough, very, very tough transition for us students and for the teachers as well, who did not see this coming in this way, in this capacity. So it was difficult for us during that transition in March.
Yeah, so we started to see that our system was not prepared for what happened in March. And for most of us, we're still in line. I know, Opal, you are just now starting school, have finished up your first week or two. Tell us about what's working this time. What's school like round 2? What do we learn from the spring?
School on round 2 is definitely, granted this is only my first week, but I would say now that the teachers and students are more used to navigating like platforms like Hangouts and Zoom for school, it is definitely a little less daunting than it was in the spring. Granted, the workload may go up after the first few weeks, but I feel confident that now that the world is a little more used to online school, that my accommodations will be very well met this school year, hopefully.
I'm glad to hear that. I know we've had conversations too about your peers, and Francis, I know we have as well. What are you thinking about when it comes to peers and other students who have IEPs and their own plans that they need specialized attention, which is of course challenging in a virtual world?
I definitely do think that administration plays a really big role in this, because as much as students want to advocate for themselves, it's kind of hard to keep talking about what it is that you need when there's nobody there listening to you. So everybody needs to take a step back and truly listen and truly try to understand what it is that students need and what students are calling for. So it's not just performative, okay, we listen to student voice and we value what student wants, but they don't actually put in the effort to make sure that those practices are implemented, whether that be in curriculum or how students receive that help and how it's accessible, especially for students with disabilities and who do need that specialized attention.
Yeah, at Student Voice, and our friends at Teens Take Charge have a saying we like to borrow that's, the only thing better than Student Voice is adult action. So I agree. It's not just listening to young people, although that's step one, and hearing what students and teachers and parents are feeling in this moment. Step 2 is action and trying things out. And so I know, Opal, you and I have had a conversation too, and I'd love Francis to jump in here as well. What are kind of the 3 main things that are your priorities going into this new school year that you think school districts and schools and teachers should be prioritizing? We're not going to get everything right, but what are the 3 things you think are really key in this moment?
I would say that I think that schools should definitely be prioritizing the mental health of their students and their staff, because last year my high school had some very earth-shaking mental health problems that our school kind of fell apart. So I think it's very important that the school finds ways to help those students stay mentally healthy in addition to their schoolwork, because we don't want to lose any more students and staff than we already have. And I would also say that it's definitely very important to make sure that those students that have IEPs, not that a lot of them that I know of are going remote, most of them are back in person, since my high school is doing hybrid learning. Most of those kids are back in person, but I would say that the ones that are on remote should have access to say para support. Like, I know last spring I didn't have aides and was mostly relying on both my parents, who were also remotely working, but this year I do have that, so that makes me hopeful that if we have to do this for an extended period of time, I have my needs met without relying on my parents.
And I want to make sure really quick, Opal, will you tell the audience what an IEP is for those who might not know what that means?
An IEP is an individualized education plan, which basically means, in simple terms, that a student with a disability, whether it be a learning disability, a cognitive disability, or even a physical disability like I have, gets what they need to be successful within their education and get as much as they can out of that inappropriate public education that is offered by our government.
Thank you. Wanted to make sure we clarified that for everyone. Francis, so thinking back to the spring, and I know you're heading into your first year of college this next week, but thinking about your kind of high school experience, what do you think we need to prioritize? What from the spring did you learn that you knew needed to be prioritized right off the bat heading into the fall?
I definitely do agree with Opal with mental health, because I feel like a lot of people expected teenagers to be okay with the situation, thinking that we just thought of this as like a mini vacation for us. But in reality, it was so difficult for teenagers who thrive off of social interaction, who literally grow from being around their friends all the time, to suddenly being so isolated and so just so far apart from the people that they saw literally every day for years on end, right? And it was hard for us mentally to make that switch right away, and then finding out, oh, we're not coming back. As a senior, when all of this was happening, all I could think about was the little things, even though, you know, everything in the world was was on fire and it was just crumbling down in front of me. As a teenager who was a little bit selfish at the time, all I could think about was, wow, I won't get a graduation. Wow, I won't get a prom. And it's those little things that kind of broke everyone's heart that made everything such a reality for us. Um, and it took a toll on our mental health, even if it was as silly as not having a school dance or anything like that. But for us who have been dreaming of that one night since we were, in third, second grade, and in public education for 13 years, it was that one night that we were really dreaming about. And it really did make a difference in the way that we performed in schools, because now it's like, well, what are we looking forward to? Another day stuck at home and not being able to do anything, and not being able to experience the things that we've been hoping to experience for so long. And it really did make an impact. And a lot of people didn't really notice it in that way. A lot of people thought we were making a big deal out of nothing. And it may seem like nothing, but to us, it was everything at the time. And another thing that I think is a big issue is accessibility. At least in my school district, like I mentioned, we're the second largest school district in the US. And we serve over 600,000 students, and our board meetings are on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Tuesday is a school day, 1 p.m. we're still in classes. And students who want to be there, who want to advocate for what's going on in their school grounds, what they feel is lacking in their public school education, they can't stand there and tell the board members what it is that they're feeling. They can't stand there and make the impact that they want to make, because LA traffic is brutal. By the time you leave at 11 a.m., you won't be in the Beaudry building, which is in downtown LA, until 1:30. And that's already 30 minutes into the board meetings. And it's hard to want to be where you want to make the change without having the resources to get you there. So right now we're having our board meetings on Zoom, and now more students are able to participate. But what happens after we all start going back in person? will those resources be taken away? Because now we'll be sitting in class and we're back to square one and not being able to say what we want to say and make that difference that we want to make.
Yeah, and I agree, accessibility, that's, I think, a bright spot that's come out of COVID, and how many more students are showing up for their school districts and parents are able to access that. So I want to just highlight that we're talking about IEPs and meeting every student's individualized need, mental health, and making how we can make virtual and in-person communities safe and comfortable for students, and those actual accessibility supports and those direct decision making, and how young people can really be involved in those decisions. And I thank you for uplifting, both of you, for uplifting and highlighting your perspectives on those. And I hope that if folks tuning in can take those things away, those are what students are thinking about in this moment, and so much more.
Thank you so much, Merrit. Thank you, Opal. Thank you, Francis. You started off the day in such an inspiring and productive way. That kind of advocacy and hope and the deep understanding you have of the issues for yourself and your peers is really inspiring. And the people I'm bringing on now, I think, can also talk about what you said, Merrit, the adult action. What are we doing as teachers and parents and workplaces to try to help some of the issues that you said about? So I'm really excited to bring up Amanda Calzada and Jessica Eggert. Amanda is a transitional bilingual kindergarten teacher from Chicago and Chicago Public Schools, and she's also a member of the DonorsChoose board. And DonorsChoose, you might know, is a nonprofit that lets people donate directly to public school classroom projects, and they funded over 1 million projects to date. Some of them are totally fascinating. I could talk about those all day. And Jessica Eggert is the CEO of LegUp. It's a company which helps childcare business owners succeed while also helping working parents access affordable and quality childcare. She's also an advisor to Ethel's Club, the first social club in digital community for people of color, and the Females Founders Alliance, a national community for women entrepreneurs. I'm really excited to talk to both of you. Teachers are being asked to shoulder a huge burden, and working parents who already are carrying a tough load, and I put myself in that category, we're carrying even more. And you both have been inspiring to me personally, watching you figure out how to help the people who are holding it all together for us right now. It's really inspiring. So thank you, guys. Amanda, I'd love to start off with you. If you could tell us a little bit about your classroom and what you've done to make things work for your students, and specifically if you have any other tips and tricks you can share with teachers.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I am so excited to share some of my perspectives. I'm going to start off by saying that this is hard. This has been really, really hard from the spring, and we're facing different challenges now as we enter the fall. And I think the most important thing for people to understand about teachers right now is that we are trying to hold it together, and we are trying to navigate this with little experience in how to do this. So much of what we do thrives off of being in a social atmosphere in our classrooms with our students. And so although we can do that virtually, and for the most part, there's more equity with technology to be able to do so this time around, there's a lot of challenges that we're facing. We have schedules that we're trying to work out, routines that work for the different ages and grade levels, and just trying to navigate this when families are in their households and they have multiple children and they have all their kids sitting at the same table, and there are distractions, and parents are trying to balance their work. And it's tough. It's tough for everyone. There are a lot of teachers that are teaching from home that have their own children that are in class in the next room, and just trying to manage that has been really hard. I think the other factor in this, especially in a district like mine, being the third largest in the country, and the area I'm in particular has a lot of low income families, is the equity with the supplies that they need to be able to work as well. It's difficult for me. I have the young children, I teach kindergarten, and so there's only so much they can do on a computer, and I've had to be very creative with the ways that I can get them engaged, not necessarily needing to be literate with technology or with reading, because a lot of the things I'm trying to point out, they can't even read. So that has definitely been interesting. And I think that one thing that has gotten me through this, and I hope that can help other teachers too, is just remembering that children are more resilient than sometimes we think they are, and they can adapt so well. That was something that I had a huge fear of at the start of the school year with a brand new group of kids. I didn't know their parents, I didn't know them, and I didn't know what to expect. But I have been amazed by the ways that parents have helped their children, that children have helped each other through the computer screen, the way they've helped me. They've helped me navigate some of the technology that I'm learning how to use. And I think the most critical thing that kind of speaks on what Opal and Francis were saying as well are those relationships. We need to look at the mental health of our students and our parents and our teachers, and the best way to do that is to build really strong relationships with them and environments where they can be vulnerable and express their frustrations and their needs, but then we can also celebrate the wins and the fun things that are happening that we're doing in our classrooms.
Thank you so much for that. Is there any other, just a quick tip or trick? You talked about engaging them through the screen, just something for the other teachers in here that you've tried that you might suggest someone else trying?
Absolutely. Don't fear being creative and getting silly. It might feel strange at first in front of a computer screen, but I've done a lot of fun things with my students that they have loved. We'll do freeze dance throughout the day to get ourselves moving. We do scavenger hunts where they'll go through their home and they'll find their favorite food or something that is their favorite color. And it allows us to build those relationships in a really authentic way because we see them in their most natural environment. And then doing some themed days. I had a lot of fun with my students doing silly hair day. We did a mismatch day. We did a pajama day where they could bring their favorite stuffed animal or toy. And we've shared baby pictures and family pictures and just really utilizing all the things around them in their home that could be strong learning tools that we actually don't have access to when we're in the classroom. It opens a whole world of possibilities to be creative and really get into their lives and then connect that to the academic content that you're teaching as well.
Thank you. And Amanda, you mentioned how important that relationship with parents is and how important the parents are for this. And I'm telling you, we're struggling. And so Jessica, I wanted to ask you, you've been passionate about helping working parents even before the pandemic hit. I'd love to know a little bit about the problems you saw then for working parents, how that's changed, and what, I mean, just quite specifically, what you're doing right now to help working parents.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Amanda, I want to thank you as a teacher. Oh my gosh, I have a second grader. And the work you all are doing right now is incredibly difficult, but it's so needed, especially at the kindergarten level, that social emotional development and the way you've been able to get silly with kids. It's been fantastic. So thank you so much for all the work that you've done as well. As Nisha, I actually spent the first part of my career leading HR and business operations teams and supporting global employees, especially parents, creating benefits and programs that could help all of our employees thrive at work. And every year we end up seeing parents with children of all ages making career sacrifices due to inaccessibility to childcare for their children while they're at work. And, the statistics show it wasn't just something that I was seeing. In the United States, 2 million parents left the workforce from 2016 to 2018 due to that inaccessibility. Before COVID, mothers were already spending an average of 14 hours a week on childcare on top of work. And we saw parents, especially moms, facing pressure and struggle to be involved parents. And I think now, given COVID 2020's challenges in general, it's even more challenging. Some parents are more involved than ever as we educate and care for our children while working from home. And some are less involved than they really want to be, especially those who are essential workers out there keeping us safe in hospitals, the firefighters right now, right? And given childcare challenges, because of COVID, it's actually expected that 27% of parents are going to be leaving the workforce. On a positive note, I think a few people have mentioned this, I'm seeing more people, more parents, more communities really step up to support each other as we find our own solutions. And a lot of organizations are banding together to find ways to support each other. I think that we've gotten rid of the competitiveness. A lot of the competitiveness has decreased. And now it's how can we come together and support each other as best as we can.
And so I'd love to actually continue that, Jessica. I know as a parent, you yourself were struggling on this idea of pods and learning environments. Can you tell this group what a pod is, because a lot of us have been hearing about it. And, what made your decision to try that out, and how can we make that accessible to more people?
Yeah. So pods are small groups of, right now we're seeing a lot of school age children, right? Where there's usually a teacher, a tutor, somebody that's helping a child learn remotely, or even homeschooling children themselves. And there are a few types of pods. I break them into 3 different areas. There's the privately funded ones that are created by companies that are popping up to support children and families. There's the publicly funded ones that are usually out of libraries and community centers. And then there's the neighborhood ones where parents in a community, in a neighborhood, really kind of a social contract of some type, saying we are going to support each other, we're going to stay as safe as possible, here's what our guidelines look like, and we're going to help educate each other's children. And the decision to join a pod is a difficult one, and it's not one that everyone can do. I know for us, it was a really difficult decision. It's expensive. I mean, often private school tuition costs, right? And you're choosing to have your child spend time with a lot of others. And many families can't afford pods. And then it's definitely not an option for those who are immunocompromised. And so, to make it accessible, when you think about accessibility, pods definitely aren't always the most accessible choice, right? We're really gonna have to see government either have to, step in to add funding and structure to this system, hopefully a temporary system, but to this system. But, what's more than likely going to happen is that more pods are going to be popping up in neighborhoods, I think in a co-op style fashion, where parents take turns educating or pitching in to bring in a tutor. For us, it was really a difficult decision to put our son in a pod. We chose a publicly funded one where we found it to be the most equitable, where there were scholarships for those who couldn't afford the care. We would consider a neighborhood one, but what I think that parents and individuals need to think about as they're creating these pods is, how can we make it as inclusive as possible? How can we make sure our children are seeing people who look different to them? How can we make sure that we're supporting the people who really need this support? And then one of the biggest things we have to think about is keeping our children in the public education system. So many people are pulling them out, doing homeschooling, private school, whatever works for your family. I think that's important. We have to take care of ourselves first, but we also have to think about the fact that as we pull more of our children out of the public school system, funding starts to go away. And we may not have that public education system to come back to, and we can't afford to lose our amazing educators. So I would say, as we think about pods, do the pods, but do the remote learning as much as we can, and support our public education system.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We're going to talk a little bit more about public education for sure, but that, I want to turn it to you, Amanda, on this question. Teachers, especially my kids are also in public school, and my husband's a public school teacher. I was lucky to serve on the PTA for 9 years. I know how scarce the funding is for our public schools. I've seen us scrounge dollars for supplies and carpets and just trying to figure out the little things. What can we do to help you as teachers right now? Are there things that everyone listening here could do to help teachers that are trying to make this work?
Jessica brought up a lot of great points when it comes to accessibility and equity. And although in a district like mine this year, there's more accessibility when it comes to the technology that's distributed, there's still a lot of other resources that our students need and they don't have the accessibility to. And this is where my role in DonorsChoose and as a teacher on the site has been so critical, because DonorsChoose allows teachers, public school teachers, to create projects and ask for the materials that they need for their instruction, and most importantly, that their students need for their learning. Just an example, I have a student right now who is writing on the back of mail with broken crayons from the previous school year. So it is so critical that we are getting these supplies in their hands. My students are 5 years old. They need crayons, they need pencils, they need notebooks. And luckily for DonorsChoose, I was able to make projects on there as well. I received some funding, which is amazing. My supplies are coming in. I'm getting some of the instructional tools I need, and I'm working on getting those supplies to my students. So I think As Jessica said, we have to support our public education. We have to support our public school teachers. And if you're looking to make a donation to a teacher in a community near you or across the country, you can explore some of those projects on the website. Teachers are some of the most creative people. You know, I'm being one, but I meet others and they amaze me, they teach me, they inspire me. And so I encourage you to take a look at some of those projects and support some of the public school teachers and students across our country.
Thank you so much for that. And I know we've got to wrap up our section, but Jessica, I wanted to also, for parents out there and also people in workplaces, just quickly, if you can just mention your survey before we hand it over to Van, what's going to be happening next week?
Yeah, I think, you know, companies are really trying to find a way to support their working parent and caregiver employees. But the first thing we have to do is listen. We often jump to finding solutions without understanding what people are going through. And so a group of executives at local organizations in Washington and I came together to create a working parent support survey that's actually going global now. It goes live on Monday. You can find it at workingparentsupportguide.com. And we'll be taking that data and then working with organizations to create equitable solutions, including policies and programs, and finding the right benefits to help parents stay in the workforce, to support our communities, and get the children the care and the support that they need to thrive. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you both so much for helping solutions. I'm going to turn it back to you, Van.
Well, look, I learned a ton. I'm sure everybody did, hearing from the students, hearing from the teachers, parents, and bottom-up leadership is really important in this situation. But also, you know, top-down leadership is important as well. And there are some things that can be done at a bigger level and a bigger scale. And I'm super happy that we've got Arne Duncan, who can be a part of this conversation. Arne Duncan obviously worked in the Obama administration in charge of education, I think from 2009 to 15. Before that, he was in charge of the Chicago public school system. Distinguished himself there as a real champion for reform and for equity and inclusion. And I know has been watching this situation with a special sense of concern and insight and understanding, now working with the Emerson Collective. So, you know, working with some of the smartest and best people in the country who care about education. Good to see you, Ms. Secretary. And I always want to hear from you on these issues. It must be heartbreaking to you to hear from those young people, their struggle. You think about the little ones, you know, K through third grade, you know, who are still learning how to read and now have to figure out to do that in a remote way. What's top of mind for you as you think about things that we could be doing better to amplify some of these bottom-up efforts?
I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for all of your leadership. And I'll tell you, just my range of emotions listening, it's inspiring. It's amazing, but I just have to be honest, Van, it just breaks my heart. And we shouldn't be in this position. And our students are working so hard. Our parents are working so hard. Our teachers are working so hard. And you know, just I'm always going to be honest, just the lack of federal leadership here is just devastating. We should not be struggling like this. And the lying, the dishonesty, the cover up has caused tens of thousands of additional people across the country to die. I'm sure you've lost friends. I've lost 2 friends. I've had 2 of my staff here in Chicago get sick. I had a friend lose 2 fingers, amputated, dealing with all kinds of very, very complicated health issues. And we shouldn't be in this situation. This was a natural disaster that morphed into a man-made catastrophe. And so here we are. And, you know, we're going to be approaching, 200,000 people dead soon. We have a start of a school year that is wildly suboptimal for everybody. Nobody didn't want to go back to school, teachers, students, parents, but it wasn't safe to do so in the vast majority of places. So what can we do, or what are people doing? I'll just give you some examples. Again, for all the devastating lack of leadership at the federal level, what we're seeing at the local level has been extraordinary. I think there are 3 priorities, and your students answer the questions well. First for me is food distribution. And I've done a weekly call with school leaders and nonprofits across the country every week, starting in March. And to see schools, as you know, aren't just educational centers or social safety nets, to see schools continue throughout the pandemic and now to feed children and their siblings and parents tens of millions of meals every single day has been extraordinary. See them, one system breaks down, one supply chain breaks down, figuring out together, that's been remarkable. Secondly, And the student from Montana talked about this, Opal, so clearly. This mental health issue is so real. Everybody's struggling. Kids were struggling with trauma before this. Now, kids whose families may have been living paycheck to paycheck and doing okay, their whole world's been turned upside down as parents have lost jobs. And so telehealth, counselors, social workers, psychologists, teachers checking on children every single day is huge. And then the third piece is obviously the education piece. But for me, it's sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's feed people first. Let's keep doing that. Let's take care of their social and emotional needs. And then let's work educationally. In terms of local examples, I have so many stories. Yeah. Guilford County, North Carolina, where they videotaped with their best teachers basically the first 3 weeks of lessons. So the best teachers were teaching to everybody. They're using class time to do individual one-on-one instruction, tutoring to help people catch up. Here in Chicago, they've given out 100,000 devices, Boston, 30,000 devices. In San Antonio, we're very poor district. My friend's the superintendent there, 49,000 children. They've given out 47,000 devices. South Bend, Indiana, using buses to create Wi-Fi hotspots in poor communities. Obviously, we don't just need technology, we need access to Wi-Fi in the internet. School districts doing wellness checks, going to people's homes, checking and seeing how they're doing. And then in LA, and we just obviously had a great conversation with a student board member from LA, one of the most ambitious efforts with the school district itself, and I'm co-chairing this committee with the superintendent there, is trying to test and then contact trace and then quarantine if need be every single child in the LA public schools. It's a wildly ambitious effort, but they have to do it. The fact that 15,000 school districts are trying to figure out how to become public health leaders, and that's no one's core competency. Again, I can't tell you how angry that makes me, but just the level of innovation, the empathy, the compassion, the humility at the local level, Van, has been nothing short of extraordinary.
I also admire the kind of bottom-up innovation and that kind of stuff. And in particular, I wanted to talk with you about a couple things. And you mentioned that with regard to Los Angeles. It seems to me that the biggest breakdown, the biggest mistake at the federal national level was not prioritizing testing, tracking, and tracing from the very beginning. There seemed to be a concern that, well, if you have too many tests, you might have too many positive outcomes. That might scare the stock market. That might panic people. And so we're just not going to test. And we can't go back, but we can go forward. Can you talk a little bit about how smart it is? I'm actually happy to be here in LA. How smart it is in Los Angeles to focus on testing kids, tracking and tracing. I would imagine at some point you get enough of a handle on where this virus is and where it's not. You can maybe the tests become a way to open the schools back up and begin to give us a little bit more access. You might see it differently. No, it's the only way. Again, this pandemic doesn't know, kids versus adults. It doesn't know red versus blue. Always school districts, schools aren't bubbles. They're not islands. They reflect their communities. And the only way we can open schools safely is to reduce the positivity rates, reduce the virus, beat it down in our communities. And absent that, it's simply not safe to open schools. And so for me, it's always three things. It's got to be public health first, public education second, and then reopen the economy third. And at the federal level, national level, they've tried to go about that in a very, very different order. And that has had disastrous effect. And so we have to test at that local level, fast, reliable, safe, and then we have to contact trace and then quarantine those where it's not working. The goal, Van, is not to open schools. The goal is to keep schools open. Yeah. I mean, the thing about it is sometimes we get trapped in these, false dynamics or false debates. The economy can't be opened up and remain opened up. The schools can't be opened up and remain opened up. Nothing can be opened up and remain opened up until we are able to test and figure out who's got it and who doesn't. The reason we have to shut everything down is this thing is asymptomatic in 40% of the people. So we don't know who's got it. You got asymptomatic spreaders. You got people who don't know they're sick and other people sick. That's the big problem. If you had testing for all, COVID testing for all, test for all, everybody would then know what their results are. And then the people who have it can stay home. The people who don't can go to work and school. So it seems to me that the answer for the people who want to go with the economy first, who want to go with education first, who want to go with public health first, is the same answer: test for all. Well, you're way too smart and way too logical.
And again, that's what, you know, we could laugh, but honestly, I want to cry. I'm so furious. I can't articulate how angry I am, because what that takes, it just takes some hard work. It takes some honesty. It takes some transparency. It takes sticking with it. It takes, you know, adjusting over time. We've learned every single week with this thing. And unfortunately, we just have leadership in Washington that has no interest in any of those. No interest in truth, no interest in hard work, no interest in transparency. And the worst thing, man, is this.
I know I can guess what political party you're in.
well, I don't. For me, this is truly nothing Republican or Democrat. This is just about saving lives. There's nothing partisan about, you know, public health. There's nothing partisan about public education. We just have to save lives. And for me, what's so devastating is we have leadership in DC that truly doesn't care if kids or teachers or parents live or die. There's no body count high enough that would make them pay attention to science. That's why this local leadership is so critical to trying not just to educate, but to save lives now.
Well, listen, the good thing about, and the bad thing about the situation is that we're all in the soup together, red and blue, black, white, brown, we're all in the soup together. Obviously, you and I are in the same political parties. We see things the same way. There may be other people who are watching this who see it very differently, but the reality is there are some common sense things. I agree with you on the chess. I want to ask you one more question about another common sense thing that would be good for now and also good for later. So many people have commented on these disparities around access to broadband, access to devices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Talk a little bit more about what we're learning about, and you mentioned that people are using buses to get the hot spots and all this sort of stuff. Talk a little bit more as you look out on the national scene and survey it, you know, what you see in terms of smart bottom-up approaches on that, and then what could be done at a federal level if we got our act together. Just talk about both ends of that.
Yeah, so what I've said is that for me, the goal is not to go back to quote unquote normal, whatever normal means education, because far too many children, millions of children weren't being served well here across America. And so for me, it's about reimagining, you know, reinventing public education. Same thing, I'm not looking to defund police, but I'm looking to reimagine and reinvent, you know, what's happening with police forces. So what this pandemic has done, for better or worse, it has just absolutely exposed the massive inequities that exist in our country across every system, and education being a big part of that. And so, yes, why aren't devices and access to Wi-Fi as ubiquitous in our country, Van, as access to electricity and water? And you start to think about, why should a kid just be able to learn, you know, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, 9 months in a year in a brick and mortar building? And whether it's in Compton, LA, whether it's in inner city Chicago here, whether it's in, you know, Appalachia, whether it's on Native American reservation, I want every kid to be able to learn anything they want, anytime, anywhere. I want them to be able to find their passion, you know, follow their genius. And they have to have access to technology to do that. Again, their minds shouldn't be trapped in a bricks and mortar building. And if we close these, you know, I call them opportunity gaps, not achievement gaps. If we close these opportunity gaps, then that talent, you know, will just have this chance to blossom and bloom and flourish. Absent that, things like technology actually exacerbate the divide between the haves and the have-nots. The other thing I think we need desperately coming out of this, Van, is a massive national tutoring initiative. We've had so many kids fall behind during the COVID slide in March and April and May and June. And then the summer slide, we have to help those kids catch up. Tutoring has been so researched, been proven to be so effective. Again, physically, virtually doesn't matter. Let's help those kids that have missed 4, 6, 8, 9 months of quality education. Let's help them catch up. And if we don't, they fall behind to a point where they may never be able to catch back up. So there's some things we can do if we have some courage that would actually catapult education forward.
Now, I've heard about a lot of great ideas. That's a great idea I've not heard about before, is a national tutoring initiative. Brag on the people who are doing, you mentioned people who have buses in the hotspots. Talk about the hotspots a little bit, but then come back and tell us more about this national tutoring initiative as an idea. But
well, again, and I think this is so important on the tutoring part, just the person who's doing this the best and happens to be a Republican governor, who's a good friend, former Governor Haslam of Tennessee, has just personally funded about 1,000 tutors across Tennessee to help kids catch up. That's great as a private citizen. He has the resources to be able to do that. But I've been advocating for $200 billion from the federal government to invest in public education, more PPE, more custodians. You know, if we truly wanted schools open, we would have created an environment where it's possible to open more bus drivers if we need it, whatever it might be. But you think about all the recent college grads who are struggling to find jobs in the job market. You think about retirees and retired teachers. Think if we had a core of, I'm just 500,000 tutors across the country that are working with the kids who are most at risk, most marginalized, most vulnerable. We know exactly who they are and giving them a chance to catch up and get back on grade level. That's the kind of thing, if we had leadership and vision at the federal level, we could do that across the country in all 50 states.
Well, I'm seeing some stuff here in the chat. If somebody says you want to be a tutor, at least here in LA, you can go to stepuptutoring.org. So that's one thing. Also, you can go to backtoschoolsolutions.us to learn even more of some of these great ideas that you're talking about. I know that the Dream Corps, which is thedreamcorps.org, is working on a kind of a broadband for all kind of a policy play. But I was so fascinated by what you said. Please go back to it about people using buses for hotspots. That's nuts. I love that.
It's not nuts. It's creative as heck. And again, people just in solving problems. So I mean, I'll back it up. People going back to the start of COVID in March and April, we're delivering meals via bus routes and then dropping off homework and then picking up homework the next day, and you get dropping more meals. So people just thinking about these things in such different ways. You can buy hotspots, you can do that. But what South Bend, Indiana did is in the poor communities where they don't have access, we know that they're parking their school buses there in those communities that are Wi-Fi enabled to create hotspots for the entire community. So just, again, across the country, local leaders are thinking, they're problem solving, they're talking to each other, they're failing fast and learning from it. There's no competition. And again, just talking to superintendents on a weekly basis, it's been extraordinary. There's no playbook for this. Nobody was trained how to do any of this, and they are figuring it out together extraordinarily well. Again, my frustration is we have 15,000 school districts. They should not be having to figure this out in isolation.
Well, I wish we could talk forever, because I don't know how you keep up the level of energy that you do, the enthusiasm, the optimism, the determination, your ability to bring people together is just unprecedented, unheard of. And part of why we're doing this whole hashtag Back to School Solutions movement is because there are great ideas out there. Whatever frustration we might have with any level of government, there's always more good people than bad people. There's more problem solvers and problem makers, but the problem solvers never get the attention, they never get the platform, they never get the support. You've always been cutting against the grain on that and making sure that great ideas got where they need to go. I appreciate you. We're going to do this again and again. We love you. We need you. Keep up your leadership, and we're going to stay connected with Back to School Solutions. So thank you, brother.
Back at you. Thanks for all your leadership. Great to see you.
Very, very good. Well, Nisha, this was drinking from a fire hose of good solutions. If anybody woke up depressed or sad today, if they spend time with us, I think they might be feeling a little bit better by now.
Yeah, and today, all over the country, you can join a local conversation. If you're on the NextDoor platform, the topic, parenting school-age kids, there are leaders from all around the country that are having these hyper-local conversations about solutions, from the small things we heard that the students are taking on to the bigger things that whole school districts are taking on that Arne said. Folks are having those conversations in their local neighborhoods to really address the needs in their local communities. So I encourage you, today's the day. We're doing it all around the country. And if you can't join one of those, but something sparked your creativity, and like I said, I served on the PTA for 9 years. I know the most creative people are out there in schools and living this day to day. Anything that comes to mind, I'd love to hear, and we'll highlight them on our website. We're connecting with other organizations, and really anyone in this space doing the work. I want to echo it. I wish it wasn't up to us, but it is, and we're out there doing it. And so I just, I hope you'll join us today and we can stay connected and keep this moving forward.
I want to give a special shout out to our partners, Thrive, the Dream Corps, obviously Nisha and her great leadership, DonorsChoose, the CAA Foundation. I want to make sure that Andy Lichtenfeld, who put a whole bunch of time and energy into this behind the scenes, gets a little bit of credit and love. But we keep saying it too fast. I want to slow it down. NextDoor. We keep saying NextDoor, we say it too fast. NextDoor has created an opportunity. If you go on to NextDoor, NextDoor is in almost every neighborhood in the country, and it's really neighbors helping neighbors. And on this in particular, 2 million people already are on the NextDoor platform talking about this, wanting to be a part of this conversation. You can get information, ideas to them. They can get ideas to you, and you can figure out who locally can help you, through the NextDoor Foundation, one of the NextDoor platform, one of our key sponsors and one of our key partners here.
Yeah, and last pitch to tell all your friends to submit ideas and solutions. We'll put the report back form right here as a last option. We want all of those. We're collecting the data, we're analyzing them. Our hope is that it helps us push to action, push for better, bigger solutions, hopefully spread the ideas to the people who need them most. So backtoschoolsolutions.us is our website. Everything's linked there. And if you fill out the form with ideas, you can get one of these prizes that have been donated to. If that's the incentive, spread it around. There is a social media toolkit that you can advertise whatever social media platform you're on to submit ideas, share ideas, and really create that community of hope that can help us come together and really help each other.
All right, well, listen.
Appreciate you.
Great job, everybody. Till next time. Back to
Thank
School
you.
Solutions.